miss your old familiar friends, but waiting just around the bend. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, there's a heart.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, news broke yesterday, very good news, that WBO 140-pound champion Maurice Hooker is going to be squaring off against the WBC's 140-pound champion Jose Ramirez on July 27th in a unification fight that's going to be aired on DAZN.
Sky Sports in the UK.
And what this indicates is basically what I've been telling you all along, that in spite of it being a very competitive market, in spite of Matchroom and Top Rank in many ways being competitors, in spite of all of that, those two different promotional outfits have a good enough working relationship that they will work together to make fights happen. They will do this because that's what they've been doing so far. Lest we forget, Vasyl Lomachenko, Top Rank guy. His last title defense was against Anthony Crolla, a Matchroom guy. Vasyl Lomachenko's upcoming unification fight with Luke Campbell. Luke Campbell is yet another Matchroom guy. That these guys, while they may have their own best interests in mind, as all promotional outfits do, because at the end of the day, these different promotional outfits, they're thinking of what's best for them. Most of the time, they all are. But the difference between some outfits and one other is that they're willing to work with other people. They're willing to extend an olive branch to make fights happen. Because at the end of the day, if fights don't happen, nobody really benefits from it. The promotional outfits don't benefit from it. The fighters and the fans, they don't benefit from it. And boxing doesn't benefit from it. That at the end of the day, fights happening is better than fights not happening. Whereas there is one promotional outfit out there that seems to have a reputation for not allowing fights to happen. That if a fight requires them to work with another promotional outfit, they rather the fight not happen at all. And we know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the PBC. Ask yourself a question. If either Jose Ramirez was a PBC fighter or Maurice Hooker was a PBC fighter, do you think that the people at the PBC would allow one of their world champions to fight on another network, to fight on a rival platform?
Hell no.
Obviously not, because they don't. This is something that they don't do. And all of this talk about fighters being on opposing sides of the street is really just an issue when it comes to PBC guys. Because other fighters that are with different outfits, they're still being involved in cross-promotional and cross-network situations. It's really mostly PBC guys that you don't see doing that. But other guys are doing it. All these other outfits that are out there, Golden Boy Promotions, Top Rank, Matchroom, even Queensberry, who just made an offer for a Callum Smith versus Billy Joe Saunders fight, show more willingness to work with other promotional outfits than anybody at the PBC. I mean, how many fights have already been stifled by the people over there at the PBC? The Mikey Garcia versus Vasyl Lomachenko fight has all but gone cold. The same applies to Lomachenko versus Davis. That ship done sailed. That done came and went.
A while ago.
The Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence fight. It feels like that's a fight that, there's just no progress. There really are no new developments. We're no closer to seeing that fight now than we were a couple of months ago. That if that fight is going to happen, it doesn't look like it's going to be any time in the near future. And that just, fights go bad. Things happen. Between now and then, a lot can happen, because the sport of boxing, it has an air of unpredictability to it. Things can all look a certain way as you're attempting to build up a fight, and before you know it, somebody gets fucking beat. Look at what happened to Anthony Joshua this past weekend. Look at what happened as a result of not striking while the iron is hot to make a fight between him and Deontay Wilder. You guys can make it out to be however the fuck you want. At the end of the day, the facts are the facts, and the PBC wanted that fight on Showtime. And as a result of them wanting that fight on Showtime, not only did they cost Deontay Wilder a lot of money that he could have made, but now the fight will never be what it was, because Anthony Joshua has just taken his first professional loss. It would have been ideal that if one of these fighters is going to take their first professional loss, it be against the other fighter. But because the PBC was looking out for the interests of the network that they have a relationship with, those negotiations ended up just getting drug out month after month, and offers are being made and offers are being rejected. And the fight's just not going to be what it was if it ever even does come into fruition, because Anthony Joshua's already taken his first professional loss. These are the difficulties that arise whenever a PBC fighter is involved. Whereas we see with Top Rank, with Matchroom, these guys are willing to work together to get fights out there, make fights in a timely fashion. Don't try to build. Don't try to marinate every single fucking fight, because they can't all be Mayweather versus Pacquiao. Some fights, they just need to happen. And the Maurice Hooker versus Jose Ramirez fight just so happens to be one of those fights. Neither one of these guys is a superstar yet. They're both undefeated world champions, but neither one of them is a superstar yet. In order for you to get a superstar out of that weight class, out of these champions, you have to be willing to match them against each other, because if you don't, and you insist on operating like an island, what you're gonna have is a champion that has an ignominious reign. There are several weight classes where the titles are split 2, 3, and 4 ways between different promotional outfits. And operating like an island, it doesn't benefit anyone. You have to have those champions. You have to be willing to match those champions against each other, even if they are on opposing sides of the street. Because a fight not happening, well, that don't benefit nobody. So I'm very pleased to hear that Maurice Hooker is going to be fighting Jose Ramirez on July 27th. I think it's a fantastic fight. I think it's the kind of a fight that both champions need and the divisions need, because we already know that the other two champions at the weight, they're going to be fighting each other very soon. Talking about the IBF champion, Josh Taylor, and the WBA champion, Regis Prograis. They're entering the final of the World Boxing Super Series, and they're going to garner most of the attention at the weight in doing so. Whereas this fight balances the scales, because where that's a unification fight, so is this. And for Jose Ramirez in particular, I think that this is a chance for redemption. For him in particular, it being that he was supposed to have fought Regis Prograis already a while ago, before the World Boxing Super Series kicked off. But both sides, Lou DiBella and Todd Duboff, I believe it was, they both agreed amicably to forego the fight between Regis and Jose so that both fighters would get the chance to raise their profiles. Now, some people looked at that and they deduced that Jose Ramirez was trying to avoid that fight. Make of that what you will. But the rhyme and the reason behind it was, okay, we want both these guys to raise their profiles, so when they do fight, it'll be a bigger fight as a result. And since that time, Jose Ramirez hasn't really done anything to raise his profile, where Regis Prograis got more and more recognized for how he looked against Terry Flanagan, how he just looked against Kirill Rillick, where Regis's profile was raised as a result of, foregoing the fight. Jose, he kind of just stagnated. Nobody was really talking about this guy very much. There weren't very many rumblings. So this fight, this unification fight, is an opportunity for him to do what he hasn't done yet. That doesn't mean he's gonna win the fight, and that damn sure don't mean that I like him for the fight, but that's what the fight is. The fight is an opportunity for him to do that, because you know what? He hasn't done it yet. If Regis comes out on top in the World Boxing Super Series, he would come out on top a unified champion. Whereas if this fight between Maurice and Jose weren't happening, what would Jose have done to have raised his profile? Not a lot. So this is his opportunity to do that. This is his opportunity to get on equal footing with what could be a unified champion that emerges from the World Boxing Super Series. This is his chance. I'll tell you that comparatively, I feel like Maurice Hooker has a slight edge. He's the taller fighter. He's been showing improvement fight by fight. He showed a lot of heart. He showed a lot of grit. In his last performance, you could see that this guy, he was feeling under the weather. He wasn't looking right. There was something wrong with him. And even though it wasn't disclosed to the boxing community at large, anyone who saw that fight knew that Maurice was battling something. Who knows what it was? But in spite of that, he showed grit. He showed determination. He showed the heart of a champion by powering through that and putting on a one-sided beating. Before that, he fought Alex Salcedo in Alex Salcedo's backyard, proving that Maurice Hooker is, in fact, a road warrior of sorts. The champion defending his title in the other guy's backyard. Hell, he won the title on hostile soil, hostile territory, foreign territory. So, I think that Maurice Hooker has shown more, respectively, out of the two champions in this fight, and I think that that kind of gives him a slight edge. We'll break down the fight as the fight date approaches, but I will say it's good news regardless of who you have winning the fight, regardless of how you slice it. 140 needs these kinds of fights, and I'm very glad to see that both Top Rank and Matchroom have done what they've got to do to give us this fight. In other news, Andy Ruiz had this to say to Team Joshua. He says, "I'm the champ, and I call the shots now." Andy Ruiz will not allow himself to get treated like the B-side in the ongoing negotiations for the rematch with Anthony Joshua. On Tuesday, Joshua officially activated his immediate rematch clause. So far, there has been a lot of talk from Joshua and his handlers regarding when and where the contest will take place. At the moment, Joshua's promoter, Eddie Hearn, is looking to stage the fight in the UK on a date in November or December. Ruiz is open to going to the UK, but he would rather have it in America or Mexico. I'm willing to go over there, or if he wants to come over here, we're still in negotiations. Have it in America? I agree.
Or in Mexico. He went on to say, I have the upper advantage right now. I know that's what Hearn says about UK rematch. As long as I talk to Al Heyman and my team, we're going to figure out where. It really doesn't matter where. As long as we get back in the ring, if we show the fans what they want to see, I'd love to have it in New York or LA. I have to look at the contract. I'm the champion. I call the shots now. So we're going to see what happens. And, I saw a lot of the talk coming from Andy Ruiz, a lot of the fans addressing it, and I myself didn't touch on it because it seems kind of farcical.
Take one of Andy Ruiz's comments in regards to going to the UK. He's saying that he needs $50 million for the rematch to be staged over there. And some people are choosing to run with this when the reality of it is far more mundane. Whatever Andy Ruiz agreed to when he first signed the contract is what determines what he's going to get, and nothing else. Point blank, period.
It's all predetermined.
All of it.
The rematch clause. Who gets control and what terms are set for the rematch are all predetermined and were already stipulated in the contract upon Andy Ruiz signing it. Thus, moving forward is all a question of what he already agreed to. You can't turn around and make new demands for a contract that you already signed. So while you might think that you have control now because you won the fight, they've already planned around that scenario, incorporated the terms into the contract, and you just agreed to it. That's how you got the fight in the first place. So moving forward, I hate to say it, I hate to break the news to Andy and just anybody else that's out there, but that doesn't put you in the position that you think it does. Andy Ruiz will not effectively
Be in control.
gain agonical control until he is free of those contractual obligations. And the average boxing fan is an idiot. They don't have any understanding of legalese or contract language, but that's really what it boils down to. It's boring, it's mundane, but that's the way it is. Whatever you agreed to get the fight in the first place included a rematch. And the terms for that rematch, well, those terms are set. Maybe there are one or two things that can be worked around, one or two things that they can iron out. Maybe they can accommodate Andy a little more.
It's a big maybe.
Him having won the rematch, but better still, these kinds of demands as far as where the venue is and what he's going to be paid for the rematch, all that different stuff, that is all in the control of Eddie Hearn, of Anthony Joshua, and you gave them that control when you signed the contract for the first fight. And at this point, attempting to operate outside of what are predetermined and stipulated aspects of the contract, attempting to operate outside of that would constitute a breach of contract. Because no matter what you think now, you already agreed to terms. And these terms stipulated contingencies in the event that Anthony Joshua were to lose. Contingencies that you already agreed to, and that likely determines who gets control over where the rematch is, how much money the fighters stand to make. I mean, essentially, this is why Dillian White couldn't come to terms with Anthony Joshua for a rematch, because he didn't like certain aspects of the contract that entailed what happens if Dillian White wins. He didn't like certain aspects of that, so he didn't agree to it, whereas Andy Ruiz did. So, there's a lot of people that want to run with the narrative, for example, that now Al Heyman has full control of all the world titles in the heavyweight division, and that's simply not the case, because Andy Ruiz has at least one more engagement with Matchroom before Al Heyman could do anything with them fucking belts. Look at it this way. If Al Heyman really had control of all the world titles in the heavyweight division, there probably wouldn't even be a rematch clause, because that was a decisive loss for Anthony Joshua. Wasn't a close competitive fight, wasn't controversial, it just wasn't. Andy Ruiz went in there, knocked him down 4 times, won the fight. But at the end of the day, Andy still has to give him a rematch. Why? Because he agreed to it. It's in the contract. So if Al Heyman really had control of all those belts that Andy just won, he might have told the guy, hey, fuck that guy. You don't got to give that guy a rematch. You beat the shit out of him. Everybody saw it. There's no need for a rematch. If Al really had control of all those belts, well, that might have been the stance that he took, and I don't know, maybe he'd walk Andy from there on out into a unification fight with Wilder. But at the end of the day, that's not the case, because Andy signed a contract and it's a legally binding document. He is legally bound to operate on the predetermined terms set forth in the contract.
Andy don't have control, bottom line. I know that a lot of people are running with these stories to try to take the piss out of Anthony Joshua's fans, anyone who's been supporting him, and anyone who's been bashing Deontay Wilder for having not fought him and delaying the fight between them. I know that a lot of these different channels and a lot of these different people that are in Facebook boxing groups are trying to use this as a precedence to take the piss and troll Anthony Joshua's fans. But at the end of the day, hey, you can do that shit all day till you're blue in the face. It won't change anything. Andy is not in control. I don't blame him for feeling that way, him having pulled off an upset this size, beating the odds, silencing the naysayers, anyone who laughed at the idea that he has a chance. I don't blame him for feeling like now he's the one in the driver's seat, but reality is far more mundane, and that is simply not the case. You're having an immediate rematch with Anthony Joshua because you signed a contract, not because you want one or don't want to have one. It has nothing to do with what you want. So long as you are the heavyweight champion, okay, you owe him a rematch. Why? You agreed to it already. And whatever other terms were set in that contract, you have to abide by them. And if you so choose not to, you will be in breach of that contract, of that legally binding document, and they'll sue you for more money than you probably just won. The real bottom line is that in Andy beating the odds and upsetting Anthony Joshua, in spite of that, that doesn't renegotiate the terms of a contract that you already signed. This isn't a new contract, and they don't appear to be renegotiating the old one, so you're still operating on the premise of your previous engagement. And until that engagement is fulfilled, you're not out of the woods yet.
Now I gather that given how much is on the line for both sides, for both Matchroom and the PBC, for both Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz, I gather that given how much is at stake in a rematch, the rematch will likely be bigger than the first fight. Not only bigger than the first fight, but bigger than any other heavyweight fight in recent memory. That's right. Given how much is on the line for Anthony Joshua, the perception of Anthony Joshua as the division's golden boy, the best of the best. This guy was the consensus #1 before this past Saturday. People are wondering what the hell happened to that guy. So they're going to be tuning in and biting their fucking nails to see if that guy decides to show up. The guy that didn't show up on Saturday. In turn, for Andy Ruiz, the people stateside, they're going to be tuning in to see if this guy's just a flash in the pan, a guy that got lucky, a guy that caught Anthony Joshua at the right place, in the right time, in some kind of weakened state, whatever you think happened. People are going to be tuning in to see what happens in the next phase, the next chapter. Will Al Heyman gain full agonical control of all the world titles at heavyweight should Andy Ruiz win the rematch, or will the belts go back to Anthony Joshua, back to the UK, back to Matchroom? What's gonna happen? There's a lot at stake in this fight, and I gather because there's so much at stake and there's so much drama associated with the fight that regardless who wins, this may be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, heavyweight fights in recent memory. Bigger than anything anyone else can put together in this weight class. I think that a lot of eyes, a whole lot of eyes around the world are going to be watching this rematch.